member of Extinction Rebellion and of Animal Rebellion, which means I look at this sometimes through the lens of the climate emergency. I'm so moved by the speeches today. There is so much synergy, which means that there is a cultural change happening. It has to happen. The last time I gave a speech was in September 2021 at the launch of Nature Rebellion. And in that speech I said, we stand on a precipice, ecologically, existentially. The climate is in trouble. We are closer to that precipice than ever, on our way to a completely catastrophic 3.6 degree rise in temperature. We have to stop funding fossil fuels, and yet Shell's Jackdaw gas field has been given the go-ahead by regulators. And we have to end animal agriculture, responsible for at least 18% of carbon emissions and up to 51% if you count the effects of historic deforestation. And yet there is another reason why we have to end animal agriculture, because the thing that we haven't quite grasped yet is that if the climate emergency is a disaster, it is the ecological emergency that will finish us off. Because even if we pulled every ounce of carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere right now, we would still not survive as a species. Because we have decimated the planet, our only home has been rendered incapable of sustaining life because of animal agriculture. Animal agriculture is a leading cause of habitat destruction, a leading cause of global loss of wildlife, a leading cause of the global extinction crisis. 76% of all agricultural land is dedicated to livestock, its feed, its grazing. Roughly half the calories that farmers grow are now fed to livestock in countries where the farmers' own children starve. Just 4% of the world's mammals left alive today are wild. Just want to put that in context. 3% are farmed sheep. In my speech I said we had to go plant-based. The time to tiptoe around this issue is over. We have to listen to the science, and the science is telling us that the only food system that will take us, human and animals both, into the future is plant-based. We have to stop fighting it. Only once we stop fighting it can we then start working together to work out how do we do this for people, for planet, for animals. We talk about the deep systemic changes that we will need to see in order to survive beyond this generation. And one of the clearest signs of our ability to take that phrase seriously will be our individual and collective willingness to confront centuries-old traditions, that of meat eating, that are not working for us. And in activism, we often talk about the need for love, compassion, humility, respect, all the qualities that we will need to take us forward into the devastating future that we face. And I believe that the greatest act of love that we can adopt is to extend it to those whose lives we have so far chosen to ignore, and whose brutal deaths still go on unabated, even as we stand here today. And in my speech I referred to the slaughter of 40,000 elephants in Zimbabwe in the 60s. And scenes from the film footage taken at that time will never leave me. 40,000 elephants shot. But today I want to remind you, as if you needed reminding, of the endless grind of hatred that we perpetrate against animals every day, every minute. 100,000, a million animals killed for their fur, 1 billion animals killed for leather, more than 100 million killed in animal testing in the US alone, 1.7 million animals shot by trophy hunters in the last decade alone, and of course, the 80 billion land animals killed for food, stripped from their mothers in infancy, raised in darkness and disease, slaughtered at a fraction of their normal lifespan. And as activists, we are told to tell the truth. So let's tell the truth about the meat and dairy industries and the hunting industries and all the slaughtering industries that exist today on this planet. Because I want us to ask ourselves, how have we come to this? A place where, in the name of tradition, more than 1,400 dolphins, including mothers and babies, are stabbed to death in the Faroe Islands. where around the world dogs evolved to crave human company and affection, are experimented upon or tortured and killed for their meager flesh in the name of tradition, where American dentists pay $55,000 to slowly track and kill elderly lions whose lives are now beyond price, where our entire agricultural system is based on the commodification of a mother's body, of the exploitation of her body. We tear baby from mother, and we tear both limb from limb, and this is not just in dairy, but every single part of the meat industry. We are eating children, and the word depravity cannot cover what we do to them. If this is the sixth mass extinction, it is arguably the first mass extermination. So in the interest of telling the truth, I'm going to read a passage from an article called Confessions of a Slaughterhouse Worker. And this is what he said. One skill that you must master whilst working in an abattoir is disassociation. You learn to become numb to death and to suffering, and instead of thinking about the cows as entire beings, you separate them into their saleable, edible body parts. It doesn't make the job easier. It's necessary for survival. There are things, though, that have the power to shatter the numbness, and for me, it was the heads. At the end of the slaughter line, there was a huge skip, and it was filled with hundreds of cows' heads. Each of them had been flayed, with all of the saleable flesh removed, but one thing was still attached: the eyeballs. And whenever I walked past that skip, I couldn't help but feel like I had hundreds of pairs of eyes watching me. Some were accusing, knowing that I'd participated in their deaths. Some seemed to be pleading, as if there was some way I could go back in time and save them. It was disgusting, it was terrifying, it was heartbreaking. It made me feel guilty. The first time I saw those heads, it took all of my strength not to vomit. I know things like this bothered the other workers too. I'll never forget the day after I'd been at the abattoir for a few months, when one of the lads cut into a freshly killed cow to gut her, and out fell the fetus of a calf. She was pregnant. He immediately started shouting and throwing his arms about. I took him into a meeting room to calm him down, and all he could say was, "It's just not right. It's not right." These were hard men, and they rarely showed any emotion, but I could see the tears prickling his eyes. It's not right. It's as simple as that. If we want to build a kind of world, the world that we need as we move forward into the emergency, none of this can keep happening. It is time, as George Monbiot has put it, for a new ethics, a 21st century morality, a wider moral compass, where we look at issues from a planetary perspective, from an animal perspective, from the perspective of the generations to come. How do we do this? We do this by telling the stories of the animals, of their sacrifice, of their love for each other, of their courage, their defiance, of their struggle. We tell the story of the pig defending his friend from the butcher's knife. We tell the story of the orangutan fighting against the bulldozer to save his forest. We tell the story of the beagle puppy still trying to play as the chemicals course through his body. We tell the story of those shot mother elephants in Zimbabwe still trying to protect their babies despite the bullets in their sides, because these are the stories that could help us finally understand what they suffer and what we lose in their annihilation. And secondly, how do we do this? We do this by ending animal agriculture. In the words of the philosopher Naviz Ahmed, the convergence of crisis we face today has come about through our willingness to subjugate the other, the innocent, whether those others, those innocents, are other people, other animals or nature herself. And so I've come to believe that animal agriculture, this belief that we have, that we can imprison, torture, slaughter, regardless of their pain and other species, that we can then consume their bodies, this is the nexus of all of our problems. That if we address the animal emergency, we will address every emergency. And that, in the intersections between animal justice and climate justice and social justice, we will find the ways to wake people the fuck up. If you want to resist the hegemony of the multinational corporation, like the 4 companies that own 85% of meat processing in the US, end animal agriculture. If you want to challenge the colonial histories of the West, end animal agriculture. Why are we growing soy on the lands of indigenous peoples? If you want to confront the culture of cruelty driving itself through communities and peoples, end animal agriculture. If you want to resist misogyny and sexism, end animal culture, agriculture, and its fundamental mechanism of commodifying the bodies of mothers for profits. If you want to end climate injustice, where those who have done least to contribute to the emergency suffer its effects right now, end animal agriculture. If you want to end the human health crisis, end animal agriculture. If you want to end ecological destruction, end animal agriculture. If you want to end suffering, end animal agriculture. Animal rights is now the greatest social justice issue since human slavery. But as Tony said, the tide is turning, and we are here today to turn it faster, to end the slaughter, faster to save the planet, faster. So I ask you today, in this moment, in this time of ecological breakdown, in the age of the climate emergency, in this, the end of days, to step fully into the role that we were always meant to occupy, that of stewards, of tender caretakers of the planet and her animals. Let us heal the rift between ourselves and the natural world, because what, if anything, are animals but the natural world made sentient? Let us put ourselves in service to her repair, to their repair, to her restoration, to their restoration, alongside them, learning from them, being with them, in peace, in harmony. Let us finally evolve. Today to you I want to say, in the words of Australian philanthropist Philip Wallen, animal rights activists like you are the bravest of all first responders, because you confront a deeply entrenched status quo of vested interests, industry, politics and culture. You are Lincoln's better angels of our nature. You are the beacons on the hill. You are the beacons on the hill. And to the animals I want to say this: peaceful, majestic, damaged, surviving, extinct, beautiful, mourned, celebrated. We see you. We're sorry. And we're coming. Thank you.
Yes.